So we have yet another Star Wars show on Disney. I don't know how they come up with this. Like every year we have 1 to 2 shows, and like they only have 1 or 2 seasons and they flop. But this one is called Star Wars Skeleton Crew, and this video is made by the Critic Drinker, and it's called Star Wars Skeleton Crew. It's not terrible. All right, let's check out the video.
Now, since it's the season of giving surprising little gifts, here's one you probably didn't see coming. Apart from Andor, Skeleton Crew is probably the best live-action Star Wars show that Disney have ever made.
What? The best? Mandalorian season 1?
Yeah, I know that's a bit like saying this particular bout of explosive diarrhea was more enjoyable than the others because I didn't feel like I'd sharted out my own spinal column, but what the hell?
Really
In the vast empty desert of fun that is modern Star Wars, even a muddy, fly-infested pond is still better than the alternative. Seriously though, it's a show that clearly understands the spirit of adventure and boundless possibilities that's been so lacking in Star Wars since Disney took over, and makes a fair attempt at recapturing it. It doesn't always get it right, but it's at least trying, and you get the impression it was made by people who actually wanted to produce something good. Unlike others I could name. The quartet of main characters all fit neatly into their standard archetypes, and generally it feels pretty close to what the corporate shill media described it as. The Goonies in space. Almost to an uncanny degree in fact, but I'll talk more about that later. Believe that! Anyway, the show follows 4 kids living on the safe but boring planet of At-Atin, which is so similar in culture and aesthetics to modern day Earth that it actually becomes kind of disorienting at times. Like I'm watching some weird hybrid of Star Wars and Saved by the Bell.
I love that show.
Either way, I'm just pleased that we're not stuck on yet another desert planet because it's the only background they can get to work properly with the volume screen. Anyway, main character Wim takes a shortcut to school one day when he stumbles across a hatch buried out in the woods. He's convinced that it's a Jedi temple because he's obsessed with the Jedi for some reason and can't wait to discover more. But when he comes back to uncover it later that night, the rest of the gang end up following him and work together to get the hatch open. But funnily enough, it's not a Jedi temple. It's actually a buried spaceship, and before you can say contrived plot event, they've accidentally reactivated it and flown off on autopilot. And so begins the gang's little adventure in a galaxy far, far away, as they try to avoid pirates and cutthroats, repair their damaged ship, and ultimately find a way back to their home planet, while uncovering the mystery of how and why it's managed to stay hidden from the rest of the galaxy for so long. Now, one of the first questions I ask myself about any new movie or TV show is, who was this thing made for? In the case of Skeleton Crew, you'd think the answer would be obvious. Kids.
Yeah.
It was even marketed as a kids show, which begs the question, why am I even reviewing it right now? Well, it's definitely not because I'm killing time until Nosferatu comes out. But anyway, I think the truth is a bit more complicated than that. In terms of tone, setup and characters, Skeleton Crew borrows pretty heavily from all those classic 1980s bunch of misfit kids go on an adventure together movies like Explorers, E.T., Flight of the Navigator or The Goonies. Which leads me to suspect it's actually trying to appeal as much to adults who grew up in that time as the kids they're raising now who've probably never even heard of those films. Because let's be honest here, how many kids today even give a shit about Star Wars? The age of the average fan is probably mid-40s by now, but whatever. Maybe I'm just overthinking this stuff. All of this is to say that the DNA which went into this show is pretty easy to pick out, and I guess if you're gonna steal pay homage to the work of others, you might as well pick the best source material you can find. And to be fair to the showrunners here, I think they did a decent enough job recapturing the spirit of those movies. The yearning for adventure and excitement that most kids experience, the desire to escape the tedium of a safe but predictable life and experience new places and people, the wonder at being exposed to a much bigger world for the first time. I also get the impression that this is going to be a pretty self-contained little story instead of some crazy galaxy-altering epic that tries to crowbar in a bunch of recognizable characters and settings just to drum up some interest and ends up being handcuffed to the same boring overarching storyline as everything else. This is the kind of thing I want to see more of in Star Wars. Self-contained stories with original characters showing different sides to the galaxy than we've seen before. Pacing wise, the second episode comes in lean and mean at just over 30 minutes, which is exactly what a show like this should be aiming for. On the other hand, the first episode is more of a slog, mostly because it wastes a lot of time after the ship's been discovered. There's a lot of busy work and travelling backwards and forwards to get the various kids invested, and overall it just feels like a sloppy and inefficient way to get things moving. In terms of characters, they all fit neatly into their stock archetypes, and if you're inclined to take the Goonies in space approach, it's not hard to see where the inspiration came from. There's the naive but enthusiastic lead who dreams of adventure and exploration, the mouthy, tough-talking sidekick with a chip on their shoulder, the clumsy, cowardly friend who just wants to go home, and the technology nerd whose ideas sometimes outstrip their abilities. I mean, it's not executed with the same energy and likability of the Goonies. There's times when the show can't seem to decide who the main character actually is, and if I was going to be really harsh, I'd say that the old Kathleen Kennedy influence starts to show through with the character of Fern, who keeps trying to muscle in on stuff that Wim should be doing himself, and skirts dangerously close to being another irritating, know-it-all Disney girl boss. But for the most part, the cast all do a decent enough job, and the characters are likeable enough in a slightly sterile, inoffensive way. And I think inoffensive is the operative word here when it comes to describing Skeleton Crew. It'll likely turn out to be a decent, adequate, and ultimately forgettable little adventure that's significant only because everything around it is so monumentally shit. I don't think it's going to stir up passionate sentiments one way or the other, but the best I can say to you is that, well, if you've got children of your own, or you've kidnapped a bunch of them and you need to keep them amused for a while, then Skeleton Crew isn't the worst thing in the world you could put on. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.
Don't push me away, you mean. What was that, brother? Let's actually check some of the comments. Okay. Oh, don't worry, Drinker. Luke will show up at the end and tell the kids it's time for the Jedi to end. The Drinker saying not terrible with the same reasonable caution that I would trust a fart. Alright. And Blue Elephant Kid grows up to a drummer in a cantina band. Yeah. True.